Interested in anything paranormal. When I was a little kid, I loved Casper the Friendly Ghost. I don't know if you had that cartoon, but you know, anything to do with ghosts or mystical things was always really interesting to me. But it wasn't until I went through that time of grief that I mentioned, where I lost several loved ones in a short time, that I started reading a lot of metaphysical books. And it was sort of a search for comfort and answers, and to make sense of my own experience, that led me to write Evermore. And so as part of the research, I read a lot of books on metaphysics, crystals, chakras, ghosts, mediums, reincarnation. I took a 3-day psychic development seminar with James von Prague, who I think Brazil is very familiar with. And I also did several past life hypnosis sessions with Dr. Brian Weiss, who I think is also published in Brazil. And so it was this great research, a great experience, and all of that found its way into the books. I've had experiences that could not be explained away in any logical manner, and it really makes me believe that there's more to this world than what we see before us. You know, Ever's grief was very much my grief. So as I wrote Evermore and she healed from her grief, I healed from my grief. Her little sister Riley is very much me when I was 12. And I had an older sister, and I thought she was so glamorous. And I would, when she would be out with her friends, I would put on her makeup and clothes and, you know, borrow her jewelry. And so Riley's character is very much based on who I was at that age. But they're also their own people in the sense that they're not completely me. They also have their own set of personality traits that have nothing to do with me. And that makes them unique. Well, Damon's interesting. When I the very first draft of Evermore, not the draft that got published, but the very first draft, he was just perfect. And I found myself getting bored when I was writing him. And I thought, okay, that's not good. If I'm bored, everyone else is going to be bored. So I stopped, I deleted all of that, and I started again. And I started to really think about who he was. And yes, he's gorgeous, and he's wealthy, and he has magic, and he's been around for 600 years. And a person that has all of those things is probably going to have done some things early on that they might regret later. You know, a person like that is probably going to have taken advantage of all of these gifts at some point. And it was only when I realized that, and he became sort of burdened and tortured about his past, and always feeling very guilty about having given Ever the elixir, that's when he became interesting to me. Because I think perfect people aren't interesting. It's the quirks and our flaws that make people interesting. So once I gave Damon a very burdensome past, then he came alive to me, and I really loved writing him. I have one book for adults. It's called Fly Me to the Moon, and we actually have optioned the movie rights to Ridley Scott, and Sharon Maguire, who directed Bridget Jones' Diary, is writing the screenplay and directing. So I'm very excited about that. You know, it's funny because you would think that writing an adult book would have been the easier experience for me, but it was actually much harder to get into the mind of an adult. You know, I had to think, how would a 28-year-old think? I never have to do that with a 16-year-old. That just comes much more naturally to me. So that book was a much bigger challenge in the very beginning, getting into her mind and her voice. Once I got into it, it flowed quite easily, and it was really fun to write. And I would love to write more adult books at some point, but at the moment I'm keeping really busy with the teen book, so we'll stick with that for now. Yeah, I think each writer has a voice, you know, and some writers have these really distinct voices that you can just tell that's a book by J.D. Salinger, that's a book by Hemingway. So I really just try to write the best story I can in the voice that comes naturally to me, and hope that that alone makes the book stand out as mine and as something unique. think it's totally inevitable when a book becomes as big as the Twilight series or the Harry Potter series. Every single book in fantasy that follows will be compared to Harry Potter or Twilight. It's just part of being in that, writing in that genre, and it's inevitable. And I think that J.K. Rowling and Stephanie Meyer have done an amazing job about getting a whole new generation of readers excited about books. And I think everybody wins in that situation, so it doesn't bother me. What I love about the Brazilian readers is that they really understand what the books are about. You know, they enjoy the romance of the books and the adventure, but they really have a connection to some of the more mystical, spiritual elements of the book. And so it's been really great being able to come out here and meet all these readers and to talk about that side of the books as well. There's a real connection to it. And so it's been just like a really wonderful audience for the books, yeah. Well, Brazil has such an amazing mix of cultures and such rich cultures. And I was reading about some of your like legends, the little boy with the backwards feet, and the little boy with the one leg that makes the sand swirl around, and we have all of these different sort of mystical religions, and it's just such a fascinating, fabulous mix of different cultures sort of married together. And so I'm learning while I'm here, and I'm excited to go home and learn even more.